Hi everyone, in this video we're going to be talking about abstractions, including what they are, why they're useful, and when you should be using them. Abstractions can be really valuable because instead of hard coding logic into our application, we can use an abstraction which uses the database. That allows us to manage and manipulate information in the database itself without having the information hard coded into the app. So that means that we can make changes without having to deploy it live. Now, that can be a bit confusing just to understand theoretically. So what we're going to do now is we're going to dive into an example where first we go over the example using the traditional method where we don't use an abstraction, and then we'll use an abstraction just so that we really highlight the value of what using an abstraction brings to you as a developer. So we're sitting here in the back end of a marketplace application where there's buyers on one side and sellers on the other side. And what I want to show you is just an email flow and how this email flow would be set up in the traditional way, and then how we have actually set this up using an abstraction, which addresses a couple of the limitations of setting up the email flow in a traditional way. And the email flow that we're going over is this send email purchase flow. And basically what is occurring is when a buyer makes a purchase on our application, they're purchasing a product from a particular seller, and we send an email to notify the seller that they've got a new order so that they can log into our application, view the order details, and fulfill that order for the customer. So that's how this email flow works, and it's triggered in that purchase process or that checkout process that the buyer undertakes after they've completed payment for the product that they're purchasing. So at that point in time, what occurs is we hit the back end and we schedule this API workflow, and what we're doing is we're sending a basic email. And as you can see in this email, we send it to the recipient's email. We have all the information here filled out. We have the subject line of "you have a new purchase." In our body, we have some dynamic text being the recipient's first and last name, and then we have the content of the body itself, as well as having the logo images. We have a button, and we then have a link on the button so that a user is redirected back to our application. This all looks great and it's working as we expected. The only problem that we have is if we need to start making changes to the copy on this email. So just say, for example, instead of writing "you have a new purchase," I want to write "new purchase order." So now that I've changed this subject line, the only way that I can actually make this new email copy be reflected in my live application is I actually need to deploy my entire application. So if I'm the admin of this application, it's really difficult for me to make changes to the email copy or these marketing changes, as I would describe them, because I need to jump in the editor. I need to understand how to access the backend. I need to make these changes, and then I need to deploy these changes to live. We don't have any way of updating this particular email ad hoc without using a developer. So what we can actually do to overcome this is we can use something called an abstraction. And what we do in this case is we actually store the email content in the database instead. And then what we do is we refer to this email content, which is in the database, and use this in our particular workflow. So whenever we need to make changes to the email content, we actually just make changes in our database. And it brings us a number of benefits as it allows us to manage all of our emails from one place instead of using this manual flow that we're seeing on the screen. And if we want to make an update to the format of the email, we can also do so in one place. So what I will show you now is how we've actually set up the abstraction in terms of a workflow and how it works. And then I'll jump over to the admin portal and show you how we've set it up so that it's really easy to manage as well. So if I click on this workflow actually uses the abstraction to send an email. So if I break it down, what we have here is we're doing a search for email templates and we're pulling out the email variant. And I'll show you what this looks like in our database and what content we actually have stored in our database. So what we first do is we search for an email template. So I'll find this in our database. It has the ID name of new purchase. So I'll go to all email templates, add in new purchase, and what I can see here is we have this email variant, which I want to copy, and I'll jump over to my email variants, add this one in. And what I can see here is my email variant captures a number of pieces of information about my email. So it captures the body of the text itself. It has something called a mail merge term, which just allows us to add in dynamic data into our emails, and I'll explain it in a moment. We also have the subject line over here, and then we also have this button text of view now saved here. So how does this change our actual send basic email workflow? So if I jump over to here, I scroll down, what I can see here is that my subject line is actually referring to the database. No content is hard coded. So here we got results of step 2, which is our search over there, which pulls out that particular ID of the email template and the email template variant, and we display the text subject here. We also add in the text body here. We add in the button text here as well. And then if I go down to my mail merge term, so if you had the first name, if you remember that over there, instead of that asterisk term, we're replacing it with the recipient's first. So that allows us to inject dynamic text into our body or subject or the button text as well. And this just allows us to make sure that we can tailor our emails, very similar to how in the send basic email, we had the hi recipients first last. So that mail merge just reflects that process. What is really useful of this is we're making changes or referring to our database. So if I make changes in my database, so if I go to here and I just change my subject to new purchase order, for example, and I jump back over to my workflow tab, I don't actually need to make any changes to my send basic email action, because all the changes I make in the database will automatically be reflected in my send basic email action because it's referring to my database. It's referring to this particular abstraction. And this is really valuable because then as an admin, I don't need to get a developer to jump into my editor to hard code new values as we did with the traditional mode and then deploy changes to live. The other benefit is if we go to our admin portals over here, as an admin, I can actually just manage all of my emails in one place because all I need to do is just have the ability to make adjustments to my database. So if I'm the admin and I go, you know what, I want to make an update to this new purchase email, I just go and click edit here. I can view my email content, so I can do an email preview, see what it looks like, but I can go to my email content over here and I could just change the subject line and go new purchased order, log in now. And now the subject line, if I click save changes, will automatically be updated in my database, and this marketing copy will automatically be updated on all the new purchase order emails that will be sent henceforth. We don't need to wait for a deploy. We don't need a developer. We don't need any of that. So using an abstraction can be really valuable in these particular cases where we, instead of hard coding logic, we just save the content to the database. And there are other examples such as a notification system where using an abstraction can be really valuable.